Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. So let me introduce our guest, Paul Joyce, which is a famous British photographer and filmmaker whose portraits are shown at the National Portrait Gallery in London, among the others. And Patrick Bixby, which is a professor of English at the Arizona State University, and also, of course, is here because he's the outgoing president of the Samuel Beckett Society. We're here today to talk about a famous picture, a famous photograph shot by Paul Joyce, a photograph of Samuel Beckett. And so let's start from here, Paul. Whenever I see a great photo, I always wonder what happened immediately before and immediately after the moment frozen in time. So have you any testy anecdote about that shooting?
The shooting of that photograph was after I'd already met with Sam. We'd got together with John Calder, his publisher and effectively his agent then, as I'd illegally made a film without his consent called The Godot, which I managed to show him. And I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Yeah. But at that time, the photograph was taken, I think, in 1979. And my first meeting with Sam would have been in the mid-60s. And we corresponded and sort of kept gently in touch. And then just by chance, I was living just off the King's Road in Chelsea, which then was quite famous as being full of boutiques and the venues of rock singers and girls in short dress, mini skirts, they were called. So it's rather surprising to see Sam strolling down the King's Road one day. And being very cognizant of the fact that he'd been attacked, I think, during the war or shortly thereafter, assaulted by a stranger. I approached him with great trepidation, even though we knew each other, but I knew that he was extremely short-sighted and probably would not recognize me. So I sort of, like two tanks proceeding down the King's Road, slightly a few yards apart, we continued our progress towards the Royal Court Theatre, which was his destination. Finally, I plucked up courage and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Beckett." And he looked round, with a sharp sort of shock. And I said, "You might recall that." "Oh," he said, "Paul." And then the two tanks sort of came together, and we proceeded together towards the theatre, chatting away. And he wanted to know what I was doing, and which, of course, was inconsequential. I wanted to know what he was doing. And he was directing Billy Whitelaw in Happy Days at the court. And he said, "Well, what, would you like to come in and watch rehearsals?" Can you imagine? "Oh, sorry, Sam. No, I was going to have a coffee at the, no, I'll see you later." So I said, "Thank you so much." And anyway, I went in and he was rehearsing for at least a week there, and I became a guest for 2 or 3 days thereafter, and indeed set up my rather ancient Gandolfi plate camera on the balcony and took a quite eloquent photograph of Billy on stage after she'd done a rehearsal, which I should have looked out, but if I'm invited next year, always the promise of yours, which is never quite resolved, then I will bring that photograph with me. And the Royal Court Theatre has been completely renovated since these days. There was a small courtyard in the back, where scenery was driven in through a very narrow gateway. It must have been a nightmare getting the scenic bits and pieces in and out of that courtyard. And it was full of rubbish, and there was a fire escape to the first floor, which led directly into the bar. So Sam would be in the bar first thing at lunchtime, you know, with a Guinness. So, and I would try and join him when I could. And on that occasion, I had gone into the courtyard and set up. I pride myself on the cameras that I have. I've got a really very good collection of Leicas and Pentax medium format cameras, plate cameras, and the great portrait camera, the Rolleiflex.
Okay.
And I had that on a tripod, and I left it in the courtyard, hoping that it wouldn't be stolen. It was down there. So I went into the bar and had a drink. So I said, so I know you're not keen on being photographed, but I'm wondering if I could ask a favor. Whether I said, no, I don't think so. No, I'm enjoying the drink. So I said, well, okay, well, let's have another and continue talking, because I've made it easy for you, because I put the camera down in the courtyard. So all we need to do is just walk down the stairs, you know. He looked a bit undecided. So I said, oh, and by the way, it's full of rubbish. He said, what? Pardon? Rubbish? I said, yes. Sacks, all sorts. Old bikes. Oh, I said, oh, let's go. So we went down the stairs. And indeed, as you can see from the photograph, there are bags of rubbish there. And so even with that, him knowing me in that kind of pleasant preliminary chat, he was still uneasy when the photograph was being taken. You can more or less see that in his expression. Yeah. Mm. He did not like this, but he tolerated it because I think he liked me. So I got lucky. But as soon as he relaxed a bit, because as soon as he saw it, he could see that I'd positioned this ancient chair, broken down chair, and a black sax there. He loved it. He loved it. Oh, rubbish, he said. Yes. Okay. So we got through it. And then I abandoned the camera, went back up the stairs, and we had another Guinness. Fortunately, the camera was still there when I stumbled down the staircase, slightly inebriated because of the excitement of the occasion, to retrieve the camera and the film. So that's how that photograph came about.
Great. I hope I can so the rubbish is the link.
The rubbish is the link, yes. And I remember reading about the time I was doing my research in the 60s about one of his then biographers had visited his Paris apartment, and in order to, which was I think on the first or second floor, and in order to get to him in the lobby, he had to clamber over abandoned bicycles and sacks of detritus. So it was clear that Sam's milieu, you know, was rather like, certainly if I was doing Godot, I'd set the road alongside a rubbish dump. Mm-hmm. I'd have the rubbish spilling over, and so the tree would be struggling to survive in the midst of tin cans and condoms, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I might add, from the perspective of Beckett studies, let's say that Paul's photograph has become an iconic image in the very iconographic realm of Beckett and his work, and it showed up on dorm room walls and so forth in the form of a poster. In the 80s and 90s, some young men might have had Farrah Fawcett or Cheryl Tiegs or someone on their wall. Others had pictures of Samuel Beckett. So it has become one of the most famous images of Beckett. And it's wonderful to hear that, well, it almost didn't happen. If Sam would have had another Guinness, maybe.
Yes,
it was to occasion that led to this photo, which has such an afterlife now.
It's interesting. I mean, there's an Irish photographer who took a lot of photographs of Beckett, particularly in the cafes close to his Paris home. I always remember talking to, I took a portrait of Brassai, the famous French photographer, because I'd read that he had a commission to photograph Picasso in the south of France. And so he traveled down there and he had a camera like my plate camera, a tripod and so on. And he arrived. They enjoyed each other's company. They smoked a lot, drank and chatted. Finally, Picasso said to Brassai, well, aren't we going to, make this photograph? So with some reluctance, both of them got into the right position. Brassai behind the camera, Picasso in front of it. He put the plate in, stood up and said, okay. So Picasso said, well, hold on, that's just one photograph. Brassai said, that's all I need. Let's go and have a drink, And I feel more or less the same way. The advent of the motorized camera was a disaster because it simply meant that you could press the button and take 30 pictures in a second and choose the one where Monroe or Gina Lolliver had the expression on her face which you felt would make for a good image in a magazine.
Yeah,
that seems to me to be the opposite of what a portrait should be, which is a highly considered, time-consuming job, not unlike that of a portrait artist. The same attention to detail. So rather, people say about photography, or to me, how do you approach it? And I say I approach it like a samurai who knows that if he unsheaths his sword, he has to draw blood. That's part of the deal. So that's how I approach a portrait. If I unleash the sword camera, I have to draw blood.
Great image. So let's great story, Paul. Thank you very much about it. And but let's talk about your first encounter with Samuel Beckett for your unauthorized adaptation of the movie of the Act Without Words #2.
Well, I think you were surprised, weren't you? Because you'd seen some correspondence which indicated from his agent, Curtis Brown, that Mr. Beckett was not interested in any way being involved in film, which is something I knew because I had mutual friends of Roman Polanski, and Polanski was desperate to all his career, and probably still is, to film Waiting for Godot, which would have been very interesting. I mean, if you think about films like Cul-de-sac and so on, bleak landscapes, I'd like to see a Polanski version of Godot. Probably Sam didn't want to because it would be more Polanski than Sam. So fair enough. So it was with great trepidation that I went to meet him because I'd made a film without overriding his authority, ignoring it effectively. But then I was a student. It was my first real film. I kind of lined up the actors and got a cinematographer. I found the location, So I thought, fuck it, let's go ahead. Let's do it. And I'm in, would you believe, 50, 60 years on, a similar situation with David Hockney, with whom I've had a very good relationship up to now. It's gone sour, and he's denying me the right to publish the photographs that I took of him, which seems to me to be extraordinary. And I'm going to have to self-publish and go against his wishes, because I think the photographs are very good and they should be seen. So these things are going to be, you know, complicated. But I thought, if I got the money at that point, in order to make the film, I sold 2 of my prized possessions: a wonderful set of golf clubs and an MG sports car. I had to get rid of both of them, and that gave me the budget to shoot the film. So I got rid of the golf clubs and the sports car. I couldn't ask them back, so I thought I might as well make the film. So I did. And it was then that, through various people, not unlike wonderful Patrick here, who people who rose to my support, Pat McGee and so on, actors and other directors and so on, and indeed writers who knew Sam, they put a good word in, I think, into his ear about me. Because after I'd made it, I showed it to Pat McGee and various other acquaintances of Sam, in the hope that something would filter through to Sam. So I guess it did in the end. But the key, the reluctant key, was John Calder in all that, because it was in his apartment that I showed Sam the film. So I have him to thank for that, even though he was extremely difficult to deal with. Calder, that is. He treated me like he was like the commanding officer of a Battle of Britain Spitfire squadron, and I was the young subaltern who just arrived, you know, on the scene. Joyce, where are you? You said you'd, things like that, you know, he'd sort of talk like that. So when I arrived in his flat, for example, with all the equipment to show Sam the film, which I had to bring up in a lift, and I'm not very competent technically anyway, so that was difficult. But he was, you know, not terribly sympathetic. Come on, Joyce, not messing about. You know, I mean, we got to go out to dinner soon, and I'm trying to lace up the projector, you know. But he was gracious enough to let me use his apartment to show the film to Sam.
That scene recalls Pozzo and Lucky in Waiting for Godot.
Oh, exactly. Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely. Many times life and art intermingle, you know. But the extraordinary thing, and I've written a little play about it, which I'd like to film at some point, the moment of seeing Sam in, because Calder's apartment was off Harley Street somewhere, one of those huge Edwardian blocks, you know, up with one of those kind of French lifts, all brass and noise as you go up. When I went in with all the equipment and so on, come on, Joyce, let's put it down there, put it down. Come on. I looked up, and far side of the room was this shrouded figure with a light behind, so he was in silhouette. There was a glass, and I think newspaper, and very slim. And I thought that's got to be him. And Calder said, "Sam, Mr. Joyce is here." And he looked up, and that was the moment I first saw him and indeed met him. And he was, of course, charming, absolutely charming. The last thing you should do with Sam is to ask him about any meaning or content in his work. The only thing you could ask him about would be technical matters. So if you say, how tall should the tree be in Godot? He'd have an answer. His answer would probably be, well, that depends on the size of the theatre and the nature of the design and so on. But he would tolerate a question like that. But you couldn't ask him who Godot was. You know, yeah. the ground would open up and you'd disappear into it if you did that. And somehow you knew the parameters. You didn't that invisible barrier you didn't penetrate. He would want to talk about today's events, you know, what I did today, just chit chat, or technical matters about a production if he was involved in. He would explain if something had gone wrong or whatever, you know. The practicalities. This is just my view of my meetings with him. That's what you could discuss and what you couldn't, and what you never would. And rather like Hockney, if you say to Hockney, that's a great painting. Would you consider selling it, David? Do you say something, Paul? Don't hear it. Those people have a wonderful self-imposed ear problems, hearing difficulties.
So you recently wrote a play called A Guinness with Godot, which tell the story of this great first encounter. So tell us more about this play you wrote.
Well, the play actually charts the course of my coming up with the idea of doing the film and then proceeding with it. So there are three main. It's fairly short, the play. What would you say, Patrick? An hour and a quarter, something like that?
Yeah, maybe not even that long.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it perform so that we could clock it, but yeah, in that range.
It'd be great to see a production, wouldn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
It depends how quickly if you really talk very fast, then we could do it in 50 minutes. But I rather like psychological investigation, and my version would probably be 3 hours. Anyway, the first scene takes place in the apartment I described off Harley Street, which was John Calder's, and it's Sam's a guest there, and he's reading the paper or something, and Calder's been out picking up another batch of Guinness, and he arrives in, and there's a conversation where Calder explains that this person Joyce seems to have gone ahead and done this film anyway, and there's it's. What do you think, Patrick? I mean, it just establishes the two characters, doesn't it? It's not much more than that, and it's setting up that Joyce is going to appear at some time, and it's going to be a bit difficult because he's gone ahead and made a film without anyone's consent. That's the first scene. The second scene is where I go to meet with. There's a very famous actor called Freddie Jones, character actor. His son, Toby Jones, has become a huge star here in the UK. So the second scene involves me going to visit Freddie Jones in his apartment in Notting Hill Gate to convince him to do the play or the film. So that happens, and I managed to convince him. And then the third and final scene is the meeting in John Calder's flat, excuse me, where I go in with the film and the projector and show it to Sam. So that's really the bones of the play. And I tried to get a little bit of information, which at some points Patrick's picked me up on anyway. But I kind of, even if a bit of it's hearsay, it's there for a dramatic imperative, what I've included about Beckett and his life.
Where did you take artistic liberties from the facts of the matter, from your actual experience as you adapted it to the stage?
Oh, I did. The only liberties I took would be in retelling certain things about his life, and James Joyce's daughter, and so on, which I don't know enough about to be absolutely concrete sure that what I said was correct. That's all. Historical moments of Sam's life, where I might have relied more on hearsay than on actual fact.
Right, and a bit of exposition to contextualize things for the stage,
yes.
For the dramatic treatment. Yeah.
But in relation to me and Sam, I tried to be deadly accurate in terms of what my memory would, allow me to recall.
Well, and by your retelling, it sounds like it was a rather dramatic scene in real life as well, with him lit in silhouette and this sort of mysterious.
Oh, very dramatic. And then what happened was, it was, oh, come on, Joyce, Calder, come on. Oh, how much longer? And so I was under this constant pressure from Calder to get it right. And it's not easy, setting up a projector and a screen. I had to find somewhere to hang the screen and lace it up. And I brought a spare projector bulb in case I thought that's the one thing that's going to happen, isn't it? As soon as I switch the fucking thing on, the bulb's going to blow. And what's Calder going to see then? So I had a spare bulb in my pocket. But it was still difficult, you have to lace it up and get the tension right with the film. This is 16mm film projector. So finally, come on, are you ready yet, Joyce? Yes, Mr. Calder. Yeah. Yes, Sam's over reading his paper and drinking, because he could see that it was going to take hours to get this thing set up. Sam, well, where do you want me? So I got the chair, put it down, so that I could get a throw of the, from the projector onto the screen. And Calder took up a position somewhere between us. And he said, "You ready?" Yes, Joyce. Okay, Sam, you ready? Yes, start it then. Click. And suddenly I saw this great shadow appear in front of the screen. And what had happened was Sam had pulled his chair right up to the screen like that, because he's blind as a bat. Which meant that I couldn't project it. All you could see was little edges. So I had to get the screen and move it across. At which point Sam moved across as well. So
there was comedy in the actual events as well, not just the drama of being this great man. Yeah.
What on earth is going on, Joyce? I said, it's Sam. His shadow is in the, I can't. Oh, he said, do the best you can. So I reckon that Sam saw about 70% of the screen in the end. And the problem, and then we were all standing back, and there was this shadow of Sam. He started to shake. Oh, for God's sake, I thought. He hates it, you know. He's going to kill me. I can see he's building up. And so I crept up close, and I heard that he was laughing. He was actually laughing. And to the point that he was shaking, which was great, you know.
Yeah.
So the film runs out, starts, you know, I switch it off, complete silence. Everybody looks at Sam. And then Sam says, out of the quietness, "Well, Mr. Joyce, so what do you want to do with it?" And Calder says, "He can't do anything with it, Sam. He can't do anything with it. He doesn't know. He shouldn't have made it. He hasn't got the rights. He can't do anything." Sam looked up. Is that right, Mr. Joyce? Well, he called me Mr. Joyce. It was one right up until the last line of the play, which is as it happened. Calder said, "Sam, we rely on royalties from our work to live, you and me. We can't go just giving things away." Is that right, Mr. Joyce? Yeah, well, regrettably, yes, it is. So he said, "What would you say to 10 shillings? Which was the equivalent of 50p. Calder was fluttering. "Sam, what do you do?" I said, I'd say yes, Mr. Beckett. Good. Now, can I offer you a glass of Guinness? That was it. That's the end of the play.
A real great story, Paul. Thank you for this. And I have a question for Patrick now, because it's a question I always ask to everyone has anything to do with Samuel Beckett. In your opinion, how relevant is Beckett work still today?
Well, I imagine you get a different answer from everyone you ask that question.
Yeah.
Well, I would say very. Of course, I'm a bit biased as a Beckett scholar and someone who's just been president of the Samuel Beckett Society, but you know, his work is relevant in a number of ways. So one could approach this from a variety of angles. As Paul's story suggests, and is still the case, Beckett has been an inspiration for artists of all stripes, from his earliest impact in the 1950s with Waiting for Godot until now. And of course, we're talking about theater practitioners, people who interpret his plays, but visual artists, musicians, composers, and so on and so forth continue to find new ways to tap into his work, find inspiration, find new kinds of significance, find new aesthetic avenues to explore. So in let's just say broadly aesthetic terms, he remains very relevant. His plays are frequently produced. I was just at a well-attended production in Los Angeles, starring Rainn Wilson from The Office, which drew in a big crowd. He'll be on Broadway in Waiting for Godot. Beckett will be, that is, with Keanu Reeves this fall. So his plays continue to be performed and audiences continue to come. But I think there are other ways that Beckett, and perhaps more important ways that Beckett remains relevant. You know, his work, in addition to being aesthetically innovative, possesses a kind of ethical and political genius, if you like, that is or has often been overlooked, but I think is more and more important today. The way that his work explores power relationships, explores authority structures, translates to any number of contemporary political situations. So his plays have been performed in Sarajevo, in Palestine, and so on. But his works of fiction, his novels and short stories, have political resonances that they come out of his own historical milieu, but they remain relevant to any number of contexts today around the world. And he really is a global figure, of course. His work has been translated into all the modern languages and is read, in every country on the planet. I received correspondence from people across Asia, across the Middle East, Africa, Oceania, etc., as president of the Beckett Society, from people interested in his work, again, for aesthetic reasons, but also for political or ethical reasons. And, part of that is the sort of dark humor that pervades much of his work. That famous line, "I can't go on, I'll go on," etc., from The Unnameable, which, in my political context, it seems important. One needs a kind of gallows humor to make it through the day. In the United States, in the early days of 2025, I think that's the case in many parts of Europe and Latin America and so forth as well. So, people continue to read his work for some kind of solace, let's say, but not a solace that isn't just placating, not saccharine in any way, but is provoking and asks us to look at the world through the lens that he developed in those very dark times after the Second World War, which again remains relevant in our own time. So I think there are any number of ways that Beckett's work remains significant and with us, and as a resource for artists, but for lay people who are trying to contend with the difficulty of their own times as well.
As far as I understand it, his work has been enormously successful when produced inside prisons.
That's true.
Isn't that right?
That continues to be the case. In fact, this production
Yes.
that I mentioned in Los Angeles, which was last November, December, went to a local prison in Lancaster, California there, and the performance, they didn't perform the whole play, but they performed scenes from the play there to a very ecstatic response, as I understand it, people who were there. And of course, that goes all the way back to some of the earliest productions in the U.S. In fact, the second production in the U.S. was in San Quentin Prison. And that's a landmark instance of incarcerated people adapting his work and finding something important for their own lives in it. And there are innumerable instances thereafter of that kind of thing happening. In LA, there's a prison program that comes out of Cal State LA that actually offers degrees to students who are incarcerated, and they read Beckett's plays, they see Beckett's performances. Other performances have come to the facilities there. So that's certainly one of the ways that Beckett's drama was relevant from the beginning and continues to be even today.
I think just as you're talking, I was speculating about three playwrights, Beckett, Shakespeare, and Chekhov, and wondering why they just go on and on through generations and different styles of production and so on. And it's perfectly clear that a lot of audiences, including the majority of school children in the UK, who have Shakespeare not forced on them, but more or less as part of their permanent curriculum, don't understand the plays, but they enjoy them nonetheless because of the human interaction, the comedy, and the fact that you can follow the storyline without understanding the subtleties of characterization behind. And I think that's true of Godot, and I think it's true of almost all of Chekhov. And in my mind, Beckett, I think Beckett had a soft spot for Chekhov, didn't he, Patrick?
He would have, yeah. And
I think they've got they share something, which is a mysterious kind of complete shell, within which there are elements that even an unsophisticated audience can understand and enjoy. I think that's one of the reasons why Beckett continues in terms of his stage productions anyway.
Well, and that's my story with Beckett, actually, is when I first encountered him as a 16-year-old in high school. Had a rather ambitious, maybe slightly sadistic English teacher who imposed Waiting for Godot on us, and I was entirely baffled, puzzled by the thing, didn't know what to make of it, but I knew there was something there that I liked and that I wanted to understand, and that it was going to take some effort to do that. I mean, here 40 years later, nearly, I'm still
penetrating it. Yes,
that's part of the attraction of both Shakespeare and Beckett and Chekhov as well, of course, is that you can return to those works over and over and over, and they continue to yield something new to you. And that's one of the ways that they remain relevant, of course, is they can't be explained away.
No,
with, a simple interpretation that kind of pins everything to the wall and says that's that. They resist that, they evade that, and continually provoke us to push further and find more and work harder to get something from them.
I think also you've got to remember that Sam was a great dramatist. I mean, who's not going to watch a play where there are three people in large urns on the stage? I mean, you don't walk out, I'm not interested in that. Why are they there?
Well, and that's something that's, I think, relevant to your call into this sense that Beckett remains important to artists across genres, particularly in the visual arts these days, is that he had such a keen sense of the visual. And even for those who are baffled by the language, as you say, yes, there's something about the scene on stage, what they see when the curtain goes up, that compels them and draws them in and provokes them to think about what they're seeing, even if some of the language escapes them.
I think the other thing to say about the language is, if you break it down, it's very often extremely simple and quite understandable. It's when it's juxtaposed into a sort of surrealist tract that it becomes more difficult. But in individual sentences and phrases, Beckett's very easy to understand. At least that's my reading of it. What do you think, Patrick?
There is that disjuncture between what you see, which is often minimalist and surrealist and baffling in its own way, and the language, which can be quotidian in some sense. It can be kind of an everyday dialogue between Diddy and Gogo and Waiting for Godot, for instance. But the relationship between the two is startling in some way. And that's part of the provocation then, is how do we align the language we're hearing with what we're seeing on the stage.
Exactly. Perhaps I could just thank the audience and hope that they've managed to last up to this point without nodding off. Just to thank them for coming to listen to us and to have a look at the Godot. Please remember, it was a very first work, one that I'm quite proud of, but it was an early Joyce picture. It's strange that, like an albatross around my neck, it's kind of returned to haunt me. I just want to say one thing about, because I've reviewed the film, and you can when you see it, you can almost hear there's a noise that film makes when it runs through a camera. And if you're a filmmaker, my vintage, you will have grown up with the noise of that, because you probably would start with a 16mm Bolex or Ingenue or something camera. I got to the point when I was directing, when there was a 400-foot reel attached to the camera. Judging by the sound of the film going through the gate, I knew how much film was left. 100 foot, 200 foot. And I know that directors like Stanley Kubrick would have had exactly the same experience. And they loved the camera. When Kubrick made Clockwork Orange, he wanted to throw a camera out of a window when Malcolm McDowell defenestrates. And he thought long and hard about that. And in the end, he bought a particular camera because he knew that it would withstand falling 60 or 70 feet onto a concrete floor. I think it was the Newman Sinclair. Now, the generation now shooting films on iPhones, I wonder what they're missing. And what they're missing is the sense of time passing and of each frame being worth something. Just think about the movies that are being shot on iPhones, and even as we've been talking now, there have probably been 500 million photographs taken. All meaningless, basically.
Well, the answer is simple, Paul. They should all be thrown out the window.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much, Paul Joyce, for being here today, for your time. Thank you again, and hope to see you soon in Italy, Ireland, or wherever.